Hello and welcome. It has been my childhood dream to own an arcade game, but for years it's always been out of my reach. I've never really had the space for them, nor did I have the money to buy them. But that all changed in 2022 when I got this, my Simpsons arcade cabinet. Sure, it's a 3/4 scale reproduction unit, but to me this will probably be the closest I will ever get to owning an arcade machine. And after owning this machine for a while, I now realize the issues and many flaws of my childhood dream. So join me as I take a look at my most expensive game console and how I was able to make it worth my while. Today's video is sponsored by 16-Bit Store. At 16-Bit, we pride ourselves in our designs and the quality of our printed products. From our display stands to our styluses, our cases, shells, and more. Explore our selection at 16bitstore.com today and get 15% off your next order with offer code 16bitreview when you order 2 or more items. To start, I want to go over why I got this arcade machine in the first place. For me, The Simpsons is a classic childhood game, and I've regretted not getting the PS3 port back when it was available. So when Arcade1Up announced that they were going to open pre-orders for this machine, I made sure to put my order in, not wanting to miss out on it again. And I saw my order in 2 ways. The best case scenario for me was that I'd live out my childhood dream of owning an arcade machine. But the worst case scenario, I got a very expensive but legal ROM of The Simpsons. Back then, I saw this nothing but a win-win. It took a long while for the machine to finally get released and delivered to me, but when it did, I giddily opened it and assembled it. Building it was as simple as building IKEA furniture with arguably worse instructions. But after a considerable amount of time, I had an arcade machine. And after getting all the audio gremlins out of the system, the only word which came to my mouth after I got this working was cool. I know that Arcade1Up machines are emulation boxes, and I know it's not going to be one-to-one to the original arcade machine. But when I started playing it, I stopped caring. The joysticks felt right, the buttons feel right, the display is as bright and as colorful as I remember it being. Honestly, this arcade machine is, in my view, the textbook's definition for how to do emulation right. Yes, this machine is smaller and it uses an LCD instead of a CRT, but as long as it feels right to play, the minor differences can be overlooked so long as there's nothing else to distract you. To me, for all intent and purpose, this is an arcade machine and my go-to way to play The Simpsons. However, with all my swooning aside and for how amazing and cool this machine is, that opinion only really lasted until the end of the honeymoon phase. And when reality of what I actually bought started to settle in, and I began to realize that my childhood dream was a bit impractical. You see, if you were to look at this arcade machine as a gaming device, it would be like this small emulation console. A box that's designed to play a fixed number of games designed to prey on your nostalgia. But unlike this emulation box, my Simpsons arcade cabinet is massive, despite being 3/4 scale, expensive, and can only ever play 2 games. Literally every other game system I own not only takes up much less space than this, including that computer, but they can play more games. And while I know that if this was a real arcade cabinet, I might be able to go in and swap out the boards. But this is an Arcade1Up cabinet, and without some serious reworking and a Raspberry Pi and replacing pretty much everything that you see at the machine, I can't do it.
And that's kind of left me feeling frustrated and upset. Here is my dream machine with my perfect game pre-installed and ready to go on it. And no matter what way I look at it, or how I try to justify it, this machine is completely useless and a waste of physical space beyond the limited amount of times when I actually want to play The Simpsons. So for me, this machine turned out to be the worst case scenario. So all that remained for me to do was to dump the ROMs off the machine, maybe pack it up, maybe just leave it as a nice piece of furniture, wasn't quite sure. However, during the process of dumping the ROMs, I discovered something absolutely amazing about this specific cabinet. Underneath the custom fonts and fancy UIs lies a MediaTek-powered Android-based system. This console, shockingly, has more in common with my television than this mini console. However, after watching the various videos online and tinkering around, I found out that not only does this machine still have its settings app completely intact, but so was the File Explorer app. Meaning that by unlocking the developer settings, I could dump not only the ROM that is contained with a connected computer, and with the File Explorer, I was able to install third-party apps like RetroArch and a custom launcher. It took a lot of tinkering and I had to create some app icons, but not only can I play the 2 pre-installed games, but I can even play more games. From ported arcade titles found in Namco Museum to the home conversions found on the NES and Sega Genesis, to even games that should have never been able to work on an arcade machine in the first place. The sky truly is the limit. Sure, this solution isn't perfect by any means of the imagination. All the joysticks and buttons are pretty much mapped to the same positions except for players 1 to 4 and the live button. So I am limited to playing single player only games, and multiplayer isn't really an option outside of The Simpsons Arcade. And yeah, due to the funky storage configuration and limited options internally, it does make putting games on USB or the SD card a bit frustrating. However, compared to before, this is so much better. In fact, I'm actually thinking of extensively modifying the system to split out the inputs, just because the machine in the state that it's in right now, I want to keep using it. It's now my go-to machine for Pac-Man, Galaxian, and Ozone, and so many more games. With hindsight, I think I should have built my own emulation arcade cabinet instead of getting this guy. However, since this machine is now acting like an emulation cabinet, I honestly love it. But unless you are willing to put in the work that I did, getting this to behave, I really can't recommend it. Unless you can pick this exact machine up for really cheap, you are better off making your own cabinet or just sticking with normal arcade emulation that you find on computers and getting sort of a control deck set up for it. But anyways, that's my arcade machine. Thank you ever so much for watching this video. I hope you have yourself a good day, and as always, take care.